Hi, everyone. So I'm Kat Mañalac, a partner at Y Combinator. I've been at YC for 7 years now, and I've seen about 1,500 companies go through our program. I'll be talking today a little bit about what YC is, how it works, what we look for in teams, and what to do while you're still in school if you're interested in one day starting a company. So at YC, I spend my time focused on a few things. First, I read applications from companies. We interview and fund companies. I also run outreach at YC, which means outreach to potential applicants and founders all over the world. I also help companies in the YC batch with their first launches. That means helping founders understand how to communicate in a compelling and concise way what they're building, and then introducing them to press and to the public for the first time. So I'll give you a little bit of background on me. Prior to Y Combinator, I worked at Wired Magazine, where I really worked at the intersection of technology and culture. And while I was at Wired, I met the founder of Reddit. So, when I was talking to the founder of Reddit, Alexis Ohanian, about what I should do next, if you've met startup founders before, they become startup pushers, startup enthusiasts. And he told me, you should start your own company, or you should work at a startup. And eventually I ended up working with Alexis on his fund and nonprofit. Alexis, as the founder of Reddit, is one of the best community builders in the world. Reddit is one of the top 5 websites in the US. And he's also, one of the top, angel investors and investors in startups. So from him, I learned a lot about how to support and help early stage companies as they grow. So a little bit of background on Y Combinator. So YC was founded in 2005 by Paul Graham and Jessica Livingston. Back then in 2005, in the summer of 2005, they funded 8 companies. And since then, we've funded over 2,500 startups. So YC was started because they believed if you're a smart, hardworking person, you could make a bigger impact in the world by starting your own company versus just joining someone else's. So since then, we've funded a lot of companies that you may recognize: Airbnb, Dropbox, Stripe, Instacart, Reddit. There are now 25 YC companies that are worth over $1 billion, and about 150 that are worth over 100 million, and that number is growing. We've also funded 2 companies that are founded by Japanese founders. Fond, an employee benefits and rewards platform for companies, and Alpaca, an API for stock trading. And one of our goals here with this event is finding and talking to and interacting with more Japanese founders. We would love to fund more companies coming out of Japan. So as I mentioned, now we have a lot of very successful companies. Our companies are now valued at over $200+ billion. And we fund companies, all types of companies, from aerospace companies like Boom Supersonic, which is building passenger airplanes, supersonic passenger jets, to consumer social apps, like Twitch that went through YC. Just to give you a sense, these are, for our last demo day, YC Summer 2020, this is the breakdown in terms of verticals of the companies we funded. So B2B software and services is about half the batch. So in the Summer 20 batch, it was about 250 companies, and half those companies were B2B software and services. Then our next biggest chunk are healthcare companies, so biotech, healthcare. Then we have, consumer companies, education, fintech, real estate, and government as well. Last batch, 40% of the companies that we funded were based outside of the US. And that's something that's been really exciting for me to see since I've started YC. Just 7 years ago, we funded our first internationally focused company. It was an Indian company called ClearTax. And back then it was sort of a an experiment. We wanted to see whether YC could be helpful to international founders building companies. And ClearTax and many of the companies that came after it were so successful that we decided to ramp up our efforts of outreaching to founders around the world. And since then, we've seen a huge growth in international companies that we fund. We fund companies pre-Series A, so about 60% of the companies we fund are pre-launch, so they don't yet have a launched product, but they might have a prototype. And then 40% do have a launched product, are probably recently launched or have launched in the past year or two and are looking to scale and grow quickly. Some companies we fund have revenue and money raised, and some are just an idea written on the back of a napkin. So it's a pretty wide range within that pre-Series A bucket. So I'll talk a little bit about how YC works and what actually happens at Y Combinator. So the deal is that we take applications from all over the world, so you can apply to YC from wherever you are, and we fund companies with $125,000 for 7% equity. So what happens is we read all the applications. So each of us are individually reading, about 1,000 applications per batch, and we end up interviewing about 1,000 companies. Prior to COVID, we were flying companies from all over the world to our office in Mountain View to meet with us for a 10-minute interview. Now we host all of those interviews online. So we end up speaking, one-on-one with, the top 1,000 companies that apply to YC. So after the interviews, they're only 10 minutes. We tell you that day if you're funded. And then prior to COVID, companies were, coming to Mountain View for 3 months to stay in the Silicon Valley and to work with us very closely. But now during COVID, we've been running our program remotely online. So the program is 3 months. And the selected startups, start working right away with us and start working on, their plan for demo day. So one curious thing about YC is, unlike, many other accelerators or incubators, we do not provide room and board for our founders or office space. And we do this for a specific reason. We do this because at YC, we aim to provide a framework for focus. We think that being in a shared office environment with 100, 200 other startups can be, very distracting. And on top of that, we like it when founders can really create a sense of culture in their own companies from day one. So if you are in a shared office environment with 200 other companies, you'll very likely absorb the culture of other companies and other founders. But if you're working out of your own home or office space for those 3 months, you can really focus on your own team and building your own culture. So we say at YC that you should only really be spending time doing 2 things. That's writing code and talking to users, or building product and then getting it in users' hands, getting early feedback from users, iterating based on their feedback, building again and kind of releasing again. So what happens at YC is really individualized for each company. The main thing that we do is office hours. So a lot of what we teach at YC, we put online for free. We have, a startup library. We do startup school. And so, a lot of the general advice is out there for free on the internet that you can read. But when you go through YC, a lot of what you do is based on interactions with your group partners and other startups in your cohort. So this is, you will do one-on-one office hours with, one of your partners probably once every week or 2 weeks on average. And if you're a company going through YC, what will happen is at the beginning of the batch, you sit down with your group partners and you talk about what are your KPIs? What is one metric that we can help you grow 10% week over week? For most companies, that's going to be revenue or users. And for other companies like deep tech, hardware, or biotech, it's going to be, we'll help you figure out what is a goal that's ambitious but achievable that we can help you get to by demo day. The goal is that by demo day, 3 months in the future, you've hit a point where investors will be excited and to join you in your journey and will want to invest in you. Other than one-on-one office hours with group partners, we also host group office hours. So during group office hours, you sit down with 2 to 3 partners and about 10 other companies every 2 weeks. And what you do during these office hours are, one, you get to practice pitching your company to your peers and seeing how they respond to what you say. You get to talk about what are the 2 things that you've accomplished in the past 2 weeks? What are the 2 things you hope to accomplish in the next 2 weeks? And what are some of your biggest challenges? Sometimes you'll get great advice from the partners who've seen, perhaps over 1,000 companies go through the program. We can really look at challenges and help you overcome them because we've seen so many other companies overcome those same challenges. But sometimes the best advice will come from other startups in your group, other startups who are in the midst of solving those problems, who maybe just solved the same problem last week. So say you have an SEO issue and you can't figure it out. Often there's a startup who's just figured out that issue, or there may even be a startup in the batch that is building a product to help solve your problem. So this is often what happens during group office hours. You see startup founders helping each other. We also have weekly speakers. So every week we will have speakers of successful, YC companies and tech companies come to YC and talk about the early stages of building their company. This who you see here, these are the founders of Airbnb. They do off the record talks, which means, we never tweet them, we never broadcast them. And one of the cool things that you hear is that at the beginning, every startup is broken. At the beginning, every startup has co-founder disputes, co-founder fights. Every startup thinks at some point they're going to die. So I think when you're in the audience and you're hearing very successful founders say this, you think there's a chance that if I'm scrappy, if I keep my burn low, if I just work really hard, I can be where Airbnb is in not so long from now. So a lot of people ask me why I think YC works, and one reason when I've talked to a lot of alumni is it's the YC network of alumni. So some of the CEOs, CTOs, and founders of the biggest tech companies in Silicon Valley are part of the YC network. But beyond that, it's a network of now over 5,000 founders. And there's a stat that in Silicon Valley, about 75% of venture-backed startups fail. But at YC, 70% of all the startups we've ever funded since 2005 are still alive. And many are thriving. As many, 25 are even worth over $1 billion. So it's really that network of founders helping one another, helping each other as they grow, that I think has become the most powerful part of YC. So at the end of 3 months, we have Demo Day. And Demo Day is when about, I think I saw recently that in our last Demo Day, we had 6,000 investors from around the world log in and watch 2-minute presentations from each startup. And so, as I said at the beginning of YC, you talk about what is your Demo Day goal? What is the goal that we can achieve that will get investors really excited about investing in us? So, for most of YC, all you're doing is building product and talking to users. But about 10 days before Demo Day, we switch into fundraising mode, which means we do something called vertebrae office hours. We sit down with each founder and we try to figure out, what is the vertebrae or the backbone of your presentation going to look like? What are the 2 to 3 points that you want to make sure get lodged into an investor's brain when they hear your presentation? So when you're presenting in front of thousands of investors, and you're presenting alongside 200 other startups, you have to be very memorable. You have to be concise, and you have to figure out what are the most compelling parts of my company and my team. So we help the companies figure that out and practice their pitches, and then they present in front of the investors there. So about over 80% of the YC companies raise the target amount of money that they want to raise after Demo Day. So on average, for software companies, it's about $1 to $2 million seed. And for bio and life sciences companies, it's about $2 to $4 million. And then after demo day, companies kind of go off on their own and continue to build. And the idea is that they've raised enough for 18 months, so they can continue building their company for 18 months before they raise their Series A. But our kind of relationship with companies goes, lasts for the entire life of a company. So what we've done is we've created a lot of software to connect the alumni. We have software called Bookface. It's like Facebook meets Quora meets LinkedIn for YC founders. So you can, people post when they're hiring. They'll post asking for intros to see CEOs and CTOs at other companies. There's a deals page. And every day you see, tens, if not hundreds of founders log in and, answer questions and help one another. We also have a program called Work at a Startup, and it makes hiring easy for YC startups because it's, so an engineer only has to apply once, and their resume goes to all YC founders who are hiring. And so, we also have Hacker News, which is a forum for people in tech, and our founders have access to the Hacker News job board, which is an incredible place to recruit engineers. What's great about YC is that a lot of the programs at YC and a lot of the partners are former founders themselves. And so they're just building programs that they wished had existed when they were first getting started. We've also launched a Series A and growth program. So the Series A program happens about 18 months to 2 years after YC's core program, when a startup is getting ready or gearing up to raise their Series A. We help them figure out, how do you best pitch your Series A, story? How do we create your deck? And we help give them intros to Series A investors around Silicon Valley and the world. And then the growth program happens when companies are at about between 50 to 100 employees and looking to scale really quickly in the next year. So the growth program brings together those CEOs, and it's another 10-week program where they meet a lot of CEOs and operators at some of Silicon Valley's biggest companies. So you'll see the head of growth at Airbnb or Uber talk about how they built out their teams and the challenges they face, and it helps the CEO really progress as their company grows. So I thought I'd talk a little bit, I think we have, a little while left. I thought I'd talk about what we look for in teams that we fund. This is probably the question I get most when I'm talking to potential founders. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about what I think makes a great team applying to Y Combinator. So first, we fund companies at the very earliest stages prior to them even having a launched product. So what we're really focusing on early is the team. We ideally love to fund teams who have at least one founder who has the technical skills to build the product themselves. So if you're building a software product, we want to see a software engineer, a developer who can actually build the first version of the product and get the MVP out. If you are a hardware founder or a hardware company, ideally you have someone with hardware experience. And the same is true for every vertical, bio and life sciences especially. Second is we love teams who can communicate clearly. We love when teams can clearly describe what they're building and why it matters. So you should be able to, in just a couple sentences, talk a little bit about what you're building, who you're building for, and why it matters, why it's going to be big. We believe that people who've thought deeply about a problem that they're solving can describe it in fewer words and in a way that anyone can understand. So we love that clarity, clear and succinct communication. We love to fund teams who have founders who've known each other and who have a good dynamic. One of the reasons is we've seen co-founder disputes kill some of the most promising sounding ideas. So what we like to look at is, does the founding team have even equity split? So even if one founder came up with an idea and worked on it a few months before bringing on another co-founder, is it close to a 50-50 split, or do we see 90-10? And if we see uneven equity, we'll ask you, why do you have uneven equity? How did you come to that decision and split? So we really try to figure out, have these founders known each other for a while? Because we know that all teams fight, all teams disagree, but we want to know that you've worked together or known each other well enough so that you know how you respond to each other when you come to an impasse and you're arguing about something. How do you respond in that moment of crisis? We love to fund people and teams that are relentlessly resourceful, teams that are just going to go out on the street and figure out how to make something happen. Teams that are scrappy, even with very little money, they'll get a product out, they'll test it out in front of people, who will, even work past all the no's. One story I love is from a team called Lug. Lug was building a company that was Uber for movers, so an on-demand moving company. So before they even started building their product, the two founders stood outside of IKEA, where people buy a bunch of furniture, and they would run up to people in the line at IKEA and say, "Hey, do you need help bringing this bed home or bringing this furniture home?" And the person in the line would be carrying the furniture and say, "Yes, I definitely need help. Do you have a truck?" And the founder said, "Hey, just push this button, and a lug will come and help you move your desk." And so they then the potential customer would press a button, and the other founder would drive their truck up to the front and help that customer, move their furniture. So before they even had a product, they were testing out whether people in the line at IKEA buying furniture would say yes and start using them and start paying for them. And so we thought that was so clever and scrappy that they validated this idea and they were on the ground really testing it out prior to spending months and months building out an actual product. So once they got enough of those customers, they spent a week outside, running down customers, and once they got enough yeses, they decided to spend all their time building the product. So we love resourceful founders. And then, we love teams that are working on mostly meaningful things. So teams that are moving quickly, that are actually, getting real things done every week. We don't want to see teams like speaking at too many events or raising, spending all their time raising money. We want to see them essentially, building product and talking to users. And then finally, we love unique insights. So, YC gets tens of thousands of applications every year. And we often see that so many founders are approaching, trying to solve the same problem. So there was one year where I interviewed 5 teams that were building on-demand babysitters or on-demand nannies. We interviewed 5 of these teams, and we wanted to figure out does one team know something that the other teams don't? And often the teams get these unique insights from launching a product quickly, talking to their users, really listening to the users and their problems, and iterating based on what their users are saying. So we love learning new things when we read applications, and we love hearing from teams who are very in touch with their users and what they need. If you have a launched product, as I said, it's about 40% of the companies we fund have something launched in the world. We'll start, thinking about the market. We think, could this in some universe become a $1 billion market? And is this solving a real significant problem for people? We love to see teams that are focused on solving, these big problems. And often the way that founders find these problems and they're solving problems they experienced in their own lives, in their own work. And they start building it to solve their own problem and start talking to more people and realizing that the problem is actually much bigger than just their own and just themselves. In terms of traction, a lot of people ask, how much traction do we need before applying to YC? And a lot of people, think, I don't have enough traction, I have too much traction, and there's never a perfect time. And we care less about overall users or overall revenue. What we care more about is how fast you're moving. How fast is this team moving to get an MVP out, to start talking to users and customers? We think about, is this team dependent on investment to move forward, or are they scrappy enough to make the first version, the MVPs, happen, without us or without any investment? And then if you have a launched product that's growing, we look at burn. We look at how much are you spending a month? Is it a ton? And if you're spending a lot, we want to dig into why and what's that going toward. So, as I mentioned, a lot of people ask, when should I apply? And often people, always think they're never ready or they're not far along enough. But I will say you can apply even if your company is just an idea or if you've just launched. And you can also apply if you have users and revenue. In one batch alone, we had a company that already had, a $3 million run rate, and they had, hundreds of customers. And we had a company that was just an idea and, the founders were in the process of building a prototype. So it's a very wide range. And what I always tell founders is that filling out the YC application will help you understand your company better, and it'll help you understand how investors think about ideas. So I think it's a great practice to do, even if you don't plan on immediately applying. And the last thing I'm going to jump into is, what we believe you should do if you're still in school, but you're interested in one day starting a startup. The first thing I would say is, when you're still in school, when you're in university, you are surrounded by incredibly smart, hardworking, ambitious people, and you may never again in your life be surrounded by so many of those smart, hardworking people. So make good friends. Find people that you might want to work with one day as co-founders or employees. Start doing projects with them. And spend time building that network, because a lot of the most successful companies in Silicon Valley, they grew early on because they started hiring their friends and friends of friends, and their smart friends that they went to university with. Second is learn to build. So if you don't yet have the technical skills to build the product that you really want to build and put out in the world, take this time to learn to code or learn whatever technical skills it is you need to put that first version of the product out into the world. And learn to build along with these friends that you've made, and do projects simply for the sake of finding projects and building projects that interest you, and spend that time learning to build with people that you love spending time with. We have a program at YC called Startup School. And it's a free online program. It's an ongoing program now that anyone in the world can participate in. And, I think there were about 45,000 founders who went through the program last year. Many of those founders end up applying to YC and getting funded. If you are in the very earliest stages of starting a company and you want to sort of be connected to a network of founders online who are also in the early stages of building, I recommend checking out startupschool.org and going through that program and helping that, letting that help you get kickstarted. And finally, if you're interested in working in one day, starting a startup, but you don't know if it's for you yet, and you're still in school and you're doing internships or looking for part-time work, during the summers, I would recommend checking out workatastartup.com. So that's our program that helps place interns and employees at YC companies. So it's a great, doing internships and really figuring out if early stage startups are for you is a great way to get started while you're still in school. I talked a little bit about Startup School here. And last I would say is, you can apply to YC, and we'd love to see more Japanese founders apply to YC. You can still apply late for the YC Winter 21 batch, and then the deadline for YC Summer 21 will be in late March. So you can apply by going to ycombinator.com/apply. And if you have any questions, you can check out our FAQs online or shoot us an email at apply@ycombinator.com. And that's where you'll find us. I will stop sharing here.